YouTube parts. Jack Spade back here with you with High Noon Leatherworx to start another project. This project's going to be a lot different than what I've done in the past. We're going to do more of a craft type project, and I picked this up at an antique store, and what it is someone has made a homemade horse on a stick. I remember having one of these when I was a kid and riding around and acting like I was on my horse being a cowboy. So my wife and I picked this up at the antique place, and she said that would be a good project for you to do, is to make one of those. So we've got some thinner leather in this bag. We're going to repurpose that. So that should work out good for this project. So today we'll make the pattern and cut out that leather, and maybe even get into some of the leather strips for the bridle. And I've got some twine, and that's what we'll make the mane out of. And then I believe I'm going to try to stitch this on my machine. I think this leather's thin enough that I can do it on my machine. So that'll be something different that we haven't done before in these series. I've always done the hand stitching. So come on in and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this one that I have here kind of as a rough pattern. I can make one pattern out of some poster board, and then I can use it for my right and my left side. I could just flip it over, so that way we're using the exact same pattern and both pieces will turn out the same. I'm not sure what I'm going to stuff it with yet. It may just be some of that craft stuffing, that lightweight stuffing, and then I believe I have an old broomstick laying around that I can use for the stick part. So let's go ahead and trace around this part and get our pattern made. And like I said, I'm just going to do a rough tracing here just to get a shape. And they did do a pretty nice job on the bridle, and they used some rivets, so that's going to be pretty handy to use. But the main part of the horse itself is sewn together. So, and they've just hand stitched big wide stitches. I'll show you that in a second, how they did it, which looks like it worked fine. But we're not going to do it that way. We're going to attempt to sew this with a machine. So you can see how big the stitches are, how far apart they are. So they've just used a needle and some thicker thread and made some pretty good sized stitches in there. So I don't know if you can see, there's our basic drawing. I'll go back over that before I cut it out so you can see it better. And this may look a little large, but by the time you get it sewn together and you get all the stuffing in it, then that's gonna puff it up and make it physically a little bit smaller size wise. And then I just put a couple of marks on each side of that stick so I'd know where that part is. I gotta leave that out, but you should be able to get a better idea of the pattern now. So there's the rough pattern for our leather. Let me double check on this and make sure that, and yes, that is going to fit. We're going to get 2 pieces out of that, one off each side, and I'm going to cut this pattern out with my knife on my cutting mat. I'll just follow that outline. When you use a Sharpie, it's a fine tip Sharpie, not an ultra fine, just a fine tip. But when you do that and you're not doing super precision cutting like on this craft project, then when you cut it, if you're not using scissors to cut out your pattern, you're using a knife, it's very forgiving because that line's fairly thick. Again, it goes back to cutting leather or patterns. You want to make sure you keep turning your leather or your pattern material to make it easy on you. So, complete cutting out the pattern. I'll trim my pattern material left over down so I can use that for other smaller projects. And then that gives you an idea what the pattern looks like. So now we can take our leather that we're going to use, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and try to, looks like this strap has been sewn in here. I'll cut this about where it's been sewn. We may be able to reuse it too. Check and see. But if we could reuse that for part of the bridle, that'd be great. So unthread this. So at this point, my microphone died, so I'm going to narrate the rest of this video, and I know that's not the best, but Obviously, since I didn't know my microphone died and I finished the video, I can't go back and reshoot the video because the leather's already been cut. So right now I'm just pulling out the straps. We're going to set those aside and use those for part of the bridle. And then I need to make sure that I can use this bag and my pattern's going to fit. So I'm checking to make sure that it is going to be big enough. And with the slots in it for the strap, it was just barely big enough. Now I'm marking it, the pattern, left and right. So I make sure that I don't get mixed up on which one I've cut and which one I haven't cut. Now I'm going to take the bag and I'm going to start by cutting the stitching out around the outside edges so that I can end up with two separate pieces, one for the front or the left and one for the right or the back. So all I'm going to do is take a straight edge, put it down each side and the bottom of the bag where it's been stitched, and I'm going to cut that stitching out of it so I end up with two flat pieces. And they had stitched this bag together with lace. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going through on the end and each side, cutting that lace out so that I end up with two flat pieces. And at first, when I took a look at this during editing, it appeared that the microphone had just shut off, but after I looked into it, microphone literally died. So there's no bringing it back, so I'm gonna have to order a new microphone. So my next video may be narrated also till I receive a new microphone. It's already ordered. I already ordered it, so should be on its way. Now I'm cutting off the last lace here on the ends that had the straps through it. And again, anytime you're cutting leather, whether it's thicker or thin, I love using a cutting mat, a self-healing cutting mat, and making sure that you have a good sharp blade in your knife. That's the key. Alright, so now I'm ready to take my pattern So I'm going to take my pattern and take the left side of the pattern, and what I'm doing is I'm turning my leather different directions to see which way would be the best use of the leather for this particular pattern. I want to make sure that I don't have any of those slots for the strap in my piece, and as you see, as I keep turning it, I eventually get it to where I have enough material to use for the left hand side, and I'll have to do the same for the right hand side. So then I'll take my pen and trace my pattern onto the leather. And again, I left that little tab down at the bottom so that I would have something to staple or tack onto the stick once we get close to completion. And all that'll do is keep the head of the horse attached to the stick so it doesn't slide off. And I do plan on having grandkids and great-grandkids using this, so I'll try to make it as sturdy as possible. So I have my left hand side traced. We'll set that one aside, take the other piece of leather, and that's the right hand pattern. I just flip it over and I'll do the same thing. So I'll take that piece and I'll keep turning it if I need to make sure that I'm using the best piece of leather that I have so that I don't have any voids or anything. Then I'm tracing the right hand pattern. And again, I'm just using a ballpoint pen. Seems to make a good sharp pattern line for cutting. And as I said earlier, I think I'm going to use my machine to sew this, so we'll probably sew it backwards and then turn it inside out so that all the stitching is on the inside so that they're hidden, kind of like a pillow. So I have both my left and my right side pieces traced out. Now I take my knife with my good sharp blade and start cutting out the leather. And notice as I'm cutting out the leather, I keep turning the leather so that it's comfortable for me to cut. When I get to the point where it starts becoming uncomfortable, notice I'll pick up the leather and I'll turn it. And what that does is that keeps it in the most comfortable position for me to cut in. And then I always want to make sure I'm cutting away from my other hand. don't ever want to draw that knife toward my hand. And if I take my time and I cut right on that line on both of these patterns, since I used the exact same pattern and just flipped it over, I should have two pieces that match up perfect. So the key is good sharp knife and take your time. Continue to cut out the one side. There's the scrap that I had left over. That looks like that's the right hand piece. There's the tab at the bottom that I'm going to attach to the stick. Take the left hand piece and do the same. Take my time, cut exactly on the line that I drew from my pattern. I guess if I would have had a camera person operating the camera, they would have noticed when the light shut off on the microphone. But since I'm self-filming all this, I just can't see that. So hopefully this new microphone I ordered is gonna last a lot longer. So I carefully continue to cut out the left hand side, making sure I stay directly on that pattern line. Notice again, just like the right hand side, I keep turning my piece of leather to keep it comfortable. There's the final trimmed piece. Now I have my two cutouts, my right and my left side. Notice you put them together, they're a perfect match. please like, share, and subscribe. Come back for the next video where we'll be doing the eyes and the bridle. So again, sorry about the audio problem, and I'll see you next time.